Hello, I'm Ed Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like. The purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues, and any other issue related to those issues, such as Bible, theology, politics, philosophy, etc. I want to give a shout out to the Rabyd Nation, all of you that have subscribed and followed and been with me for quite some time. Thank you very much. Anybody who's watching this video for the first time, or me for the first time, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate it. Whether you're a Christian or not, it doesn't really matter. The issue here is to discuss some of these issues. Today we're here on the Rabyd Atheist Sunday show. I've kind of decided that the Rabyd Atheist Sunday show is going to appear in the afternoon here in the United States, mostly because it allows me to get up and put things together and maybe actually do the show and edit it on Sunday, and then Saturday I can work on something else for later in the week. Either way, it doesn't really matter. The issue was I woke up this morning and I realized I hadn't done a video yet, but I think releasing in the afternoon kind of works a little bit better for me, because then I can pretty much guarantee I'll be around to do the show. So I want to thank everybody once again for coming by. The basic format of the show has changed just a little bit. I'm going to talk about various topics, various different things. I used to do just a regular Sunday school, and now I'm just kind of more going to talk about various different ideas involved with what we're doing here on the Rabyd Atheist show. For instance, I'm going to start off with basically a Sunday school lesson, and today I went back to see where I was with the Sunday school, and I realized, okay, I finished 10 and 11, where you have all these genealogies and people, and then the last line in verse in chapter 11 talks about Abram being born. And what chapter 12 is the call of Abram. Okay, now you got to remember that in these back days and all the rest of it, what you end up with is things like there's no chapters or verses in the earliest texts of the Bible. It's just all one big thing. And the reason that's important is because when we look at it, we'll call chapter 12 the call of Abraham or Abram. The thing is, there wouldn't have been anything like that. They would have gone right from the genealogy right into the call, unless we're talking about editing. Remember, I talked about the J document, the P document, and things like that. There's different traditions that are being woven together into this final document. And I think that may be what's happening here, because we have a lot of different stories. Now, the way chapter 12 is outlined is very simple. You have the call of Abraham, where God promises his descendants will be as the sand of the sea. He lives in Ur of the Chaldees. There's a call, let's leave your country, get the heck out of here. Go to a land I will show you, and then I will make your descendants, as the sand of the seashore, and so on and so forth. The issue with this text is a lot of people use this text, and particularly the three major monotheistic religions, look at Abraham as a hero of faith. All three of them look at Abraham as a hero of faith. The Islamic people look at him as kind of the father of their nation, same with the Jewish people. The Jews look at him as the beginning of the covenant with his people. He is the origin story. The same is true for many of the others religions. The Arabic peoples right now claim origin to Abraham. And so there's a lot of cause of conflict there. Christians, of course, thanks to Hebrews 11, look at Abraham as a hero of faith. And so what you end up with is this guy that is basically a hero in all the religions. Now, the problem with chapter 12 is he's pretty off to a bad start of being a hero, even from my perspective. He gets this call, and God takes him to the land and shows him the land and says, I will give this to your descendants if you follow me. Well, the thing is, this, at the time, it's really a bad time to be in Palestine, because there's a famine. So Abraham heads to Egypt to get some food, to get relief from the famine. And this is where we find our hero, Abraham, screwing up for the first time, because he basically, and there's some interesting issues of justice here too with Abraham too. He goes to Egypt and he doesn't tell everybody that his wife is his wife. He says, no, she's my sister. Okay. And all of a sudden Pharaoh begins to break out. His people begin to, have all these diseases, and the text indicates sexually related diseases. And so all of a sudden Pharaoh is like, what the hell is going on? And Abraham says, hey man, she's my wife, and I just, forgot, I was afraid. Okay. Now Abraham's caution in the ancient world probably is justified. His lie is probably justified from that standpoint. But our hero of faith doesn't show a lot of faith in God at this point to preserve him. He pretty much decides that he's going to take matters into his own hands. Now, I have a problem with this passage on a couple of reasons. Number one, to the present day, we have a group of people claiming a piece of land based on a covenant made to this man, this chapter in particular. We also have other people claiming them as part of their lineage. We have another faith, Christians, who consider him a hero of faith, but right at the beginning he lies, doesn't trust in God really all that much, if you ask me. And then the justice of God kind of really sucks here. Okay, Pharaoh doesn't know, his people don't know that she is his wife. So why would he punish them for doing this if they don't know? Why wouldn't he say, hey, Abraham, you need to tell these people? Why does God always have to be like a dick about it? Like he has to punish people for stuff they don't even know. Do you honestly think that if Pharaoh had known that Abraham's wife Sarah was his wife, that he would have done anything? I think he's even the one that says, hey, somebody could have lied with your wife. They could have laid with your wife, and, it would have been a greater thing. But just the fact that she was around, and it's like nobody had done anything to her, okay? And yet God is inflicting all this bullshit on them. Why doesn't God take the initiative to just say, hey, how about some free exchange of information here? The story doesn't make any sense from a simple, if God is an omniscient, omnipotent God, and he's all loving and all wise to all peoples, why does, first of all, he need to call a particular group of people? Why can't he share that with everybody? Does he have some sort of inadequacy in his communication that he can't reach everybody else? And I'm already going to hear all the believers making excuses for God. Every excuse you make is just a show of the failure of your faith. Because if God is God and he desires all people to come to repentance, then right out the gate, he could have showed himself to every single person in the way that would convince them, including me. And yet, this does not happen. God doesn't love us enough, apparently, to show us that this is the absolute truth. And that's kind of the lesson for this one, because I think God is really a dick in this one, because all we really had to say is, hey, all he really had to do is go to Pharaoh and, hey, this lady that he says is his sister is really his wife. Don't touch her. Keep it on the down low, but don't let anybody touch her. And I think that would have been a far better solution, because then nobody has to get all these diseases, nobody has to be hurting, nobody has to be going through all this bullshit just to get a lesson across. And God would have showed himself merciful to everyone. Instead, he just, because of ignorance, people's ignorance, he just said, well, you're ignorant, you don't know this, so I'm going to punish you. That's a really dick move, and it's a very abusive. To punish a child, for instance, because they don't know something, that's just abuse to me. And so that's kind of the Sunday school for today. I think Genesis chapter 12 just is the beginning of a lot of misery that continues to the present day. And I'd also say that God is kind of presented as a real dick and inadequate. And Abraham certainly is not presented as a hero of faith in this one. The most obvious thing is he didn't believe God because he tried to cover his ass and cover his wife's ass. So there you go. He was more concerned about being killed and his wife being taken from him than anything else, but probably his own skin mattered most to him. Um, let's go into a more newsworthy topic. I wanted to do this a couple weeks ago, but I think it was in Tennessee. I've got a couple of things here, but I think it was Tennessee that there was a book burning. I find cancel culture to be very, very interesting, especially when the right and the religious do it. Because when the right and religious do it, everybody seems with cancel culture to want to inflict punishment for what people say or write or do. And it really pisses me off. Okay, I was watching Bill Maher, his show the other day. I'll link this particular show above my head here in a minute. But he was talking about cancel culture, and he was having a feud back and forth with Whoopi Goldberg because he came out with one of his shows and said, hey, we need to open up and get back to normal. This version of COVID isn't really all that bad. And Whoopi came back at him and nailed him right between the eyes and said, oh, you're being... And then he came, and then she said something stupid about the Jewish people, kind of goes back to our Sunday school lesson here. And then she got like a 2-week suspension off The View. And Bill Maher made a great point. He says, so let me get this straight. The View has basically suspended somebody for having a view. Yeah, I agree with that statement. I'm very much pro free speech. I don't care who it is. Say what you want to say. I don't want to cancel you. I don't want to tell you to shut up. I don't get angry about words. I examine words and I evaluate words, and I think that's why I'm an atheist. Okay, I started examining the Bible and examining its claims and examining the claims of Christians and the claims of atheists, and it became more and more a thing of, hey, this doesn't make any sense. Okay, if cancel culture on the right side of the aisle was in full force, particularly religious cancel culture, I would never have gotten the opportunity to do that. Because what cancel culture on the right does, and particularly the religious right, the fundamentalist right, does, okay, and this is in Tennessee, so it's part of the Bible Belt, and I'm going to get to that in a minute because somebody asked me about that. So what do? They grab Harry Potter books, they grab all this stuff that they don't like, that they preach again, this is sinful and this is evil, you need to get this out of your life, and they burn it. All you're telling me is by burning them that you don't have an argument against them. In Game of Thrones, Tyrion Lannister has a great line. He says, when you rip a man's tongue out, you're not punishing him, you're just afraid of what he has to say. And I think that's the problem I have with cancel culture. Why are you afraid? If you're afraid of what people have to say or write or do or produce, it tells me that maybe there's some truth to what they're doing and you don't want to face that truth. But a person that can face what somebody writes and does and says, and does it with a smile on their face and says, well, here's the problems with that, and has some actual dialogue, I think it does a better job. I think Bill Maher's right about another thing. We have lost the ability to dialogue. We have really lost the ability. You just can't talk to anybody. I get the ire every once in a while from a Christian who comes at me with some sort of bullshit. And it's like, dude, just talk to me. I don't have a problem talking to you. Okay, just write your comment. I'll respond in time. It may take a bit, but I can't always respond to every comment, especially if it's repetitive. I've already responded to it, then I just don't want to deal with it again. So we have that. I don't know. And then somebody, because this happened in what I would call the Bible Belt South, Tennessee. I don't like book burnings because they remind me of the Nazis, and I'm not going to apologize for using that. If you have to burn books because you're afraid of their contents, I would say that you are a very weak person. Okay, don't do that. But I'm down here in the Bible Belt, and somebody said, are you going to do any videos related to how to deal with shit in the Bible? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how to deal with it myself. The problem was, people ask me what it feels like. I says, I feel like I've gone back in time to the 1980s and the strength of the religious right back then. And I feel like that's how it feels here in Texas and probably anywhere in the Bible Belt. There's still this religious right, I don't think anybody can win an election down here without at least pandering to the religious right in some way, shape, or form. So you have to do that. I also, and I feel like I've stepped back in time with attitudes too. I mean, the racial attitudes, all the other attitudes, just feel like I've gone back in time about 30, 40 years. Like all the progress that I saw made just doesn't exist here. And I think there's a lot of truth to be said that religion kind of does that to you. It holds you back. It holds you back from thinking. And so because you can't think about what your attitude should be, you just kind of go with it and flow with it and do whatever you're going to do. And I think that's why I feel the way I do about living in the Bible Belt. So I'm kind of looking at it from a Bible Belt standpoint, and I'm thinking, what can I say about this? How do I cope with this? I don't know if I'm going to. That's the problem. I really don't like it here sometimes because of it. I mean, everywhere I go, somebody's wearing a cross, and I just have this urge to like, dude, you're wearing a symbol of Roman execution around your neck. And I know it's your symbol for your faith, but God, do you realize how gross that is when you really think about it? You know, I'm not going to prevent you from, if I rounded around with, you know, an actual skull around my neck, how quickly would people think I was a really weird dude? You know, but I don't know, maybe we got to move on from that. But I'm still trying to get a grasp of what it's like to live in the Bible Belt South, and I don't know if I want to grasp it completely as an atheist. I think my real issue, it's part of my real issue why I don't want to stay here right now. I'm going to give it 2 years and give a full evaluation as I come to the end of the second year of my teaching career of whether I want to move. And I'll probably go back home if I move anywhere. I'll go back to Michigan because Michigan's still my home. It still feels like my home. Texas doesn't feel like home yet. And maybe that'll change in a year. I don't know. But right now I just don't feel it. So kind of there. And it's part of the problem is this Bible Belt bullshit. Okay, this absolute allegiance to Christian nationalism drives me nuts. Okay, and I think that's what's really bothering me. All right, I'm going to move on to deconversion. And actually, I'm going to talk about what I call reconversion. A friend of mine who probably 6 months ago talked about his own deconversion experience, how he had left Christianity, how there were a bunch of questions that just never got answered. And so when he tried to answer them, he realized they weren't answerable, and he left the Christian faith. He then went on, he did a lot of videos exposing ministers, exposing this, exposing that. Got in a little trouble with YouTube for copyright stuff, I think. Had some issues. And then very recently, about a month ago, he says, I'm back to being a Christian preacher. Now, the first thing I want to, maybe many of you know who I'm talking about, but the first thing I want to talk about here, though, is we need to recognize that this person did not leave the Christian faith and become an atheist or an agnostic. He left the Christian faith, and for all practical purposes, I think he became a pagan. Okay, he followed more of a pagan mythos and way of looking at things. So, from my perspective, this isn't really, it's from one form of nonsense to another form of nonsense. Okay, I'm not trying to diss anybody who's pagan or Christian or whatever with that statement, but from my perspective, that's what it looks like. Okay, so to be fair, when I listened to him and his brother, they both tried to keep alive this idea that they were going to see their relatives again and that they were going to transcend death. And I think this is why people, there's a lot of reasons for reconversion, but I think Christopher Hitchens hit it on the head. We're afraid to die. And as long as we're afraid to die, we're going to be religious. We're going to have religion in our society. And I agree with that. People say, well, you're not religious. I said, well, I'm not afraid to die either, because it's kind of ridiculous. From an atheist point of view, it's ridiculous to fear death. You're going to die, and when it happens, you'll cease to exist. Okay? You won't have any fears about it anymore. You won't you won't be upset about it. You won't, I mean, all of that just disappears. The people that are left behind are the ones that really have to deal with your death. If you're very well connected with people and you love people and care about them, yeah, there's going to be a lot of grief. But you will be over. okay, from an atheist point of view. So I think Hitchens hits it on the head because he's basically saying as long as we're afraid to die, as long as we have a desire for an afterlife, we're going to come up with some sort of way of looking at it. And I think when I see people like my friend and his brother who eventually reconverted back to Christianity, I kind of see this. I see this, okay, I'm facing a disease, I'm about to die. What happens after death? And you begin to justify all kinds of stuff. I wouldn't mind so much, but he's gone back into a type of Christianity that I would consider very fundamentalist, and we're talking about hell all the time, and we're doing memes. I mean, I'm going to show one of the lighter memes today in the Christian meme of the week that he posted, but it's like, dude, really? Do you have any evidence for this? See, I have this terrible desire with a lot of people that reconverted. Well, you said you left faith because of X, Y, and Z, and those questions weren't answered. Have they been answered? And if not, then why did you reconvert? Because it seems to me that you should have your questions answered before you go back in. Because if you're not going to answer them, well, a lot of times I hear reconverted people go, well, there's just something we're never meant to know. Bullshit, okay? I think knowing a lot of things is very possible. I think people use that as an excuse so they can justify faith. Faith, to me, is a dishonest position because you are literally believing and trusting in something you cannot prove is true. And so I always love the Christian accusation it takes more faith to be an atheist because I'm like, I don't have any faith. And it's hard for people to grasp because almost everybody has some form of faith. I consider faith to be a vice, not a virtue, okay? To me, it's a vice. Okay, because you're literally you can justify anything with faith, including murder and genocide and every other goddamn thing that faith has been used to justify. It is not, it comes off as a virtue. It's probably the most insidious vice of all because it comes off as a virtue, but really it causes a lot of harm, both individually and collectively. And so I don't have a lot of respect for the word faith anymore. So if you're going to convince me I have faith, you bullshit. I don't have any. I have a lack of faith in anything because I don't consider faith to be honest. I'm not out here saying there is no God. I'm saying the evidence for the existence of God is unconvincing at this present time. I call myself a 6.9 atheist on Dawkins' scale, mostly because it's funny. 69 is funny. Year I was born and, probably all the other reasons that 69 is funny from a sensual point of view. But anyway, I'm a 6.9 atheist. I leave the door open for somebody to convince me that some sort of God, deity exists if you can empirically prove it. But right now, the evidence is unconvincing, so I'm going to go about my life as if there are no gods and goddesses and all that other bullshit and just go forward. I'm going to treat it like all the rest of the fairy tales. As far as I treat it as mythology, which I find a fascinating thing to study because it reveals a lot about the people that had that mythology. But I'm not going to sit there and talk about how I believe it. I just don't. So there's that. So what's some of the other reasons that people reconvert? Social pressure. I feel very alienated as an atheist because, like it or not, people of faith are really good at the fellowship socializing thing, and we atheists kind of suck at it. It takes us a lot of work to do it. I mean, there's several atheist fellowships, but because we're so thin yet, we're still only 6-7% of the population of the United States. So when you're walking down the street and you see 100 people, there's only about 6 or 7 of them that are atheists. Okay, so on average, and that's still pretty thin. Sure, you can probably find ways to fellowship and get together, but a lot of times atheists have very different views, and there's all kinds of ways to be an atheist, so that's just not really the thing. Some people just miss the fellowship of friends. There's good friends that they have inside the faith, and so if reconverting is the price they pay to get that fellowship back, they often will do it because they're afraid. This is why shunning is very powerful. I have another friend who's facing that from his own spouse. She's basically shunning him because he doesn't believe anymore. Well, yeah, yay, but I don't see how that works. But then again, I do, because if you really love your family and care about them, shunning is a very effective tool to get you to come back, because the only way you're going to come back is reconverting. And this is my problem. Okay, so my challenge to those of you who are thinking about reconverting is, did your questions that cause you to deconvert get answered? If the answer is no, then you need to re-examine those questions and ask yourself, why would you reconvert if your questions haven't been answered? What answers your questions? And does it really answer your questions? Go back and take a look at it. So, and two, are you doing this of some sort of motive of fear of death, or desire to see a loved one, or wanting to get back into fellowship with, the former believers, the former faith? Those are not good reasons to reconvert. They're understandable reasons to reconvert, but they're just not good reasons. You need to have the good rational explanations to your questions that you were looking for before. Christian meme of the week. This was posted by my friend I talked about earlier. God is saying to you today, my child, you're worrying about too much. Remember who I am. There's nothing too hard for me. You may not see it, but I have everything planned out for you. Well, let's start with the first sentence. God is saying to you today. How do you know that? How do you know it's God talking? Once again, we have to go back to the proof. How do you know that God is saying that? Because when I look at a meme, any meme, I realize that somebody human put the picture on there in digital format and then added words to it. That's what a meme is. Okay? That's not God speaking. That's not God doing anything, unless you're going to say that the person that's doing that is speaking directly for God, in which case we have another discussion to have. So what God is saying, well, you don't know that God is saying that. You haven't heard it. You haven't tape recorded him, his voice speaking these things. So you're just writing something that feels good and feels nice based on your preconceived beliefs. It doesn't prove a damn thing. It says, my child. How do you know you're his child? There are like at least 1,000 different versions of salvation. How many different religions? I don't know. How do you know that you're his child? Because somebody told you? Some preacher told you? The Bible tells you? That's not proof. That's not evidence. Remember who I am. I love this line because I'm like, well, which part do you want me to remember? Do you want me to remember the part where you drowned like a gazillion people because you got pissed off? Do you want me to remember the part where you had 40-some kids killed because they called some dude old bald head? Do you want me to remember you, the guy that caused David and Bathsheba's kid to die at 7 days old, completely innocent because of something that David and his mother did? If I read through the stories of the Bible, do you want me to remember that the best answer you could come up with for human sin was to sacrifice yourself to appease your own wrath when you could just forgive people? Is that the part you want me to remember? Remember who you are. The same God that gets all upset because somebody works on the Sabbath and actually wants to have them killed, but blissfully ignores slavery? Which God do you want me to remember? Because there's two gods in the Bible. One is an okay dude, and the other one's a despicable human being. And yeah, they're both human because human beings wrote it. What other part can I do with all this? There's nothing too hard for me. Well, apparently it's too hard to put in your book that slavery is a bad idea, that genocide probably shouldn't be done. Apparently it's too hard to convince everybody of your reality, even though you're an omnipotent, omniscient God, so you would know what needs to be done and have the power to convince everybody, but somehow you can't pull that off, even though the Bible says it's your desire to see everybody saved and come to a knowledge of the truth. Well, if that's true, and we have an omnipotent, omniscient God, everybody should believe. But that doesn't happen. So apparently there is something too hard for God, and this is just nice feel-goodism. You may not see it, but I have everything planned out for you. Well, that's nice assurance. And it's very convenient that I can't see it. It's very convenient that it's invisible, just like you. gee, God, you're invisible, so we can't see it. I mean, when people describe God, it's like, well, that's almost like he doesn't exist. And so is this non-existent plan. I just found this very interesting that you have to really warp your understanding of reality to get this kind of meme produced in the public by Christians. I'm going to have a few more that are a little bit more funny, but this is the kind of crap that gets posted on my Facebook feed on a regular basis by people who are well-meaning. I'm not saying they're not, but they don't have any proof of any of it. It's just a feel-good thing, and that's kind of where they're going with it. All right, so I'm going to get my comments on my videos from a week ago, roughly a few days ago. I produced a video about going through depression and things like that. There's one comment I'm going to deal with later because it's a typical Christian comment, and I think it's something that I'm going to deal with a little bit more, but I want to see some of the other comments. Aloha, good to see you again too, bro. I've been, he talks about depression mostly because of, the beer bug and politics. And he asked about my goatee. I figured it would be 3 inches long. I got to a certain point and it didn't grow anymore. It literally wouldn't get any longer. It kept breaking off. I think the hairs are just too brittle. They're too rough and too brittle to give me any length yet. So I'm going to let it grow for a little bit longer. Terry Moore, I suffer from depression most of my life. I've known for years it was caused by fundamentalist religion, which left over 20 years ago. I'm gay, but in the that was it until my 40s. The shame and guilt heaped on me when the church was unbearable. My life got much better when I became an atheist. Thanks for sharing your story. Yeah, Terry, dude, I really wish, that things were better, but fundamentalism just kicks the living shit out of people for just being human, and I think that's awesome. Freebird of Reason, good to see you again, bro. Extremely good to see you. I think during our time of Christian, we really find ourselves. We call this personal relationship with God. This is called praying, talking to ourselves, not a personal God. I think we do find ourselves. We just call it God. Belief in all that is ahead is once we have a religious mind and leave something, our self-awareness behind. This is a natural part of being enlightened to untruth. We need to find the respect for ourselves. We are wholesome humans. I would say that it was, as you say, religious mind control, the preaching of sin that really needed to go. We must learn to discover our true beauty. You are a beautiful person, that is for sure. Get the blood moving, heart rate up, very good for releasing endorphins, I'm sure you know. I strongly believe that the thinkers are the ones that get depressed the most. I can say that during my time in church it was the lowest point of my life. Depression like hell on earth towards the end. Life is a struggle for all creatures. We can only hope to rise up again. Find out who we are not once we are more. As Bruce Lee says, we get knocked sometimes, get up 8. Very pleased to see you. I will, if you ever need to speak personally, I'm here 24/7. Great video as usual. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I think rediscovering your true self is a very difficult thing. Lisa Eddy, good to see you again. You're dealing with a lifetime of religious trauma, loss, and moving forward. This is a lot. Take all the time you need to take care of for yourself. She goes into a lot more detail, and I would love to respond to the whole comment, but man, there's just a lot of there. I think the biggest thing that she says is, what kind of adventure can I have today? And I don't know. I think I may want to make that my motive for everything. But thank you for the comment. I appreciate it. Catherine G, boy, it's really rough here. I'm sorry. You've been through a lot of huge changes. I think it will be better. Hang on. Thank you. Ellerin Wolf, it's okay, Head. I've been dealing with depression for the vast majority of my life, too. It's important to have a support network where you can be there for your days. You want nothing to do with anything, to encourage you to do the things you enjoy. Yep, agreed. That's why I'm getting back on YouTube. There's a good community here. Mini Rack, yeah, I saw some raw emotion. Reminds me of your deconversion story from 2 years ago when I discovered you. So then I come over to think of all the people who have deconverted, that have deconverted. It's everywhere. In fact, I understand there's a movement of ex-Christianity with ex-Christians, happy with the Christians of the tenant are destructing them a la carte. Yeah, I think you're right, Mini Rack. I think this is happening a lot. Dean Cardiff. Sorry, been there too. And though not actually back to him, I have found comfort in a small group of men, community where there are none, wonder and desire, but where there is love and support. Just be encouraged, Jed. We care about you. Okay, thank you. Jenna. Now, Jenna has been commenting left and right on a lot of videos, but I'm going to take this one. My pastor's wife held my days-old newborn and declared him fit for hell. I was in shock. I converted at 14. I had never internalized that we believed that a baby was a sinner. This was in 1983, so it's harder to do research and find out there are saner voices, so it took me a while to extract myself from it. Just horrible, these lies. Glad you're back, Ed. Great ideas. Really resonate with the misfit thing. Love your Fenrir. P.S. I make my bed every day, too. Yes, thank you. That's just some of the comments. I've got one other comment I'm going to deal with from a Christian, but I think it's going to be reflective of the next video I'm going to make, which I'm going to talk about I'm going to restate my challenge to Christians if they want to convince me not to be an atheist. And then I'm going to use this comment as a way of showing how this is not how to do it, how this person pretty much did everything wrong. So I don't hold anything against them, but I want to show them, hopefully, and they'll listen how they do everything wrong when it comes to atheists, but we'll see. One other thing I want to talk about, I'm seriously considering writing a new blog about atheism and deconversion. For those of you that may be more interested in reading something and reading out a level argument that's a little bit more concise. So I'm kind of heading down that road. So I guess I would be interested in hearing what your comments would be about me writing a blog called The Rabyd Atheist, probably of some sort, and maybe taking some of the issues to more of a written format. I need to get back writing. It's one of my coping mechanisms for my depression that I've been away from for quite some time. But reading, writing, being in the gym, doing these videos, just getting back to life is what helps me stave off my depression. So I'm trying to find a way to write about things and go forward with writing with them. So thank you very much. So I'm just interested in what your comments would be. Thank you once again for stopping by. You can, of course, support me on Patreon. I have different levels of support there. You can look at those. Some of them are an attempt to be funny. I'll leave the link in the description. You can follow me on Facebook. This is a good way to get announcements if they happen. I also have been announcing things in the community tab, and some of you have been getting those. It's a new feature. They don't give you the community tab until you get like a sizable community. So now that I have it, it's been a much better way to communicate with you all before it was a Facebook page. But the channel's kind of leveled off, and I think we're going to start to grow here again, hopefully very soon. So thank you one and all for all of that. And once again, I come before you, and I hope I can convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Ed Rabyd, also known as the Rabyd Atheist, signing off and wishing you a good day.